Boyle, I'm going to start this show by asking you a simple question. Do you like big games?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. That's a no-brainer.
Well, we have them this week in the Volusia, Flagler, St. John's area. We've got games with stakes. We have games with playoff implications. We have rivalry games. We've got it all. In now week 8, is that right, of this season?
Week 8, we're almost to the finish line.
That doesn't even sound right, but it is here, week 8. And this is Quick Slant from the Daytona Beach News Journal and the St. Augustine Record. We already mentioned Chris Boyle, the expert around here. I'm Chris Vinel. You can find us both on Twitter. I'm at Chris A. Vinel. Chris Boyle is at Chris Boyle DBNJ. And of course, you can find our work on both of our websites, St. Augustine Record and Daytona Beach News Journal. But let's get to the big games. We're going to start out with Mainland and Deltona this week.
Great Volusia County matchup. Two teams this is a pivotal district game. I think it's really kind of a decider potentially for the title. Both teams still have to play Seabreeze. Deltona will do it first. They'll play on Monday next week, and then it's a little bit longer for Mainland before they play the Sand Crabs. But Deltona's coming off its first loss of the year. They won 5 in a row to start the season. Mainland's on a tear. They're scoring at will. I mean, this is going to be a really fun matchup. I was impressed with Deltona's offense. They can throw it a bit. Like they pride themselves on running the ball, but that passing game was very, very efficient with Isaiah Robinson throwing it, Jude Santana lining up in the slot. Like, this is a team that can pose some problems. And I'm not sure Mainland is exactly the right caliber of opponent for they're going to pose problems, but they can do it. I mean, they did it against DeLand. I'm not going to doubt them for much longer as far as who they can do it against. They've scored on just about anyone this season.
And it goes back to week 1 when they started the year with 69 points. Of course, they're in their hardest, portion of the schedule, like you mentioned. But yeah, it's two very explosive offenses there. Let's go up north to Bartram Trail and Creekside. That's going to be an insane game.
I think it's going to be the loudest game of the year. I think I went to Creekside last year when they played Fleming Island, and that was a really raucous place to be. You can only imagine when their neighbor from less than 6 miles down the road comes into their yard. Big game. They're undefeated. Bartram Trail at 6-0. Creekside's 5-1. Playoff implications are enormous. For potentially first round home games, for making the playoffs outright, for maybe the district championship, depending on how things break. This has got so much to it. Bartram has dominated this rivalry. They won 13 of the 14 all-time matchups, and I assure you the Creekside knows everything about that. So they are going to be looking to make a statement. I think this is going to be easily one of the games of the year in this area.
Whoa, that's high praise.
Yes, there have been some great games too. And St. Johns County, for whatever reason, get out your calculator every Friday night. They're putting up points left, right, and center. Every one of those games is in like the 50s. It looks like a basketball score.
I love it. Let's go to University and Spruce Creek. University, a team that was hot, coming in the last week, had won 3 straight, but now they kind of lost their identity with their top 2 quarterbacks out a little bit, trying to refine that on offense here in the middle of the season. And then Spruce Creek, who, it finally got back to winning ways last week.
Yeah, University, that quarterback situation is very unfortunate. That they had really turned their year around, and now they're kind of scrambling to figure out how they're gonna move the ball. And certainly against Mainland is a tough enough challenge as it is. And it's not going to get much easier with Spruce Creek. I do think they found something. They had a lot of time to stew and plan for Atlantic Coast and to figure out how they were going to, turn their offense around. They did it all on all 3 phases. And this is another important district game opener in 9-4S. Really gives somebody the opportunity to take that first step towards the postseason in a 4-team district that also includes DeLand and New Smyrna Beach. But, this is a game that last year got out of hand early. Creek won 35-0. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that sort of concrete and that clear cut again, just because so many players from that game have since graduated and left. But it should be. I do think Spruce Creek will win the football game.
Quick hitter time.
Let's do it.
There's a couple of teams that can put themselves in the postseason this week. Flagler, Palm Coast can get in with a win over Nice, and Atlantic, with a little bit of help, can get in with a win over Crescent City. Are you buying both of those, one of those, or do you think both of them are going to have to wait another week?
Well, it got a little more complicated with John Killingsworth getting hurt on Monday night. His status, I think, is important because him and Kwasi Kwaku are difference makers, and you'd like to have as many as you can on the field against a team like Crescent City that does have a pretty good pedigree. I'm going to say, and I'm going to stick my neck out there, I'm going to say both of them clinch, which would mean that Flagler beats Nice head-to-head. Marcus Mitchell's status is up in the air, too. He missed Friday's game against O'Galley. Might have been rest, might have been load management. They've played 5 games in 21 days, but they've been really good when they've had a full week to prepare for an opponent. So I do think Flagler gets the win. I think Atlantic will defeat Crescent City, and I would think that then the caveat to that is Lake Weir defeating Taylor, and that would clinch the district for Atlantic mathematically.
Let's go to Seminole and DeLand. DeLand's offense has really been clicking, highlighted with 58 points last week in that crazy game against Deltona. But can they score enough to keep up with Seminole, one of the top programs, in the state?
They can score on just about anyone, I think. They've moved the ball really well. Can they score enough to keep up with Seminole? I think the short answer is no. I think Seminole is just way too powerful. Their passing game is one of the best in Central Florida with Luke Rucker at quarterback, Goldie Lawrence, Michael Key at wide receiver. They've moved the ball with ease, and DeLand's defense has had trouble making stops all year. I just don't think that they're going to be able to keep pace this week, but I do think DeLand looks very promising as they get ready for district play. Javon Ross scored 6 touchdowns against Deltona the other night. And at home, he's been a fantasy stud. He's got 10 touchdowns at home this season. So they are playing at Spec Martin, so expect him to have another big effort. But I do think Seminole will pull away.
Start Javon Ross in your fantasy leagues.
There you go.
All
Fired
leagues,
up.
12-team formats, 16 formats, whatever you got, start them this week. Ponte Vedra had a wild week, an up and down week last week. They had the comeback against Flagler Palm Coast and then lost on a last-second field goal. And then they essentially did the same thing on Friday night but won. Did they save their season on Friday night?
There's a real good chance they did. That win over Bishop Kenny is going to come up big, I think, in the points tally. And they can do themselves another world of good by beating a good Trinity Catholic team in Ocala on Friday night. Another game I think will be very competitive. When you look at strength of schedule, I think that will keep Ponte Vedra in the playoff conversation till the very end. If they can win a few of these games down the stretch, I think they still have Creekside up ahead. They've played Bartram. They've played Flagler. All these teams are like playoff caliber teams. Florida High is another one they played early in the year. So all these games are going to help. And Ben Burke continuing to take strides week in, week out and make plays at quarterback as a runner and as a thrower. I do think that they potentially saved their season. They're going to be pulling hard for Nice. It's going to be like one of those things where you have to like stomach rooting for your big rival. But if Nice pulls off an upset and beats Flagler, that puts them back in the district hunt too, because it could be a 3-team tie.
Tocoi Creek gets Bradford this week, an undefeated Bradford team. And Tocoi Creek's been a real big success story this year, but can they score against a really vaunted Tocoi or Bradford defense?
Well, hardly anyone scored on Bradford all year. I think they've only given up 7, so that's a tall ask. But Tocoi has run the ball well pretty much the entire year. I do think they'll put some points on the board, but I don't know if it's going to be quite enough to beat a team I think is the favorite to win that district. And them and Palatka I think can get ready to potentially go head to head for the title in a short amount of time.
Father Lopez is on a 3-game win streak. Are they on your radar? Have you elevated them?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean they're in a winnable district too. They play maybe their toughest test here with Holy Trinity this coming Friday. If they win that game, I mean all they have left is Halifax Academy, a team that they should beat on paper, and they've taken care of Melbourne Central Catholic. So if they win out, if they win on Friday, I think you can probably put them in the mix as a team that's going to make the playoffs out of this area. So definitely the way that they've been able to score as of late and beat the teams they should beat, they've got to be on the radar.
One last note before we leave. Beachside opens up their new stadium. It's going to be their first home game in their new place for that first year program. And they have Paxton, which it should be a pretty good game. That's going to do it for this week's edition.
They've won 4 in a row. Don't slight them. They won 4 in a row too. Like they're going to this on fire.
My hands are up. I'm not there. I am not slighting them in the slightest. Is that a phrase that I can use?
Sure. You just saw them too. Like I know you're not ragging on them at all.
5-6 last week in the game that I covered out there,
Oh, yeah.
and they can score with the best of them. I can assure you that.
That's right.
Like I said, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Quick Slant. Thanks as always for tuning in. I'm Chris Vinel alongside Chris Boyle, and we'll be back next week.